Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Helena City Commission Administrative Meeting. December 1st, 2021, 4 p.m. Welcome and thank you for participating in the City of Helena City Commission Administrative Meeting. We are pleased to be able to provide this alternative meeting format in the city's effort to broaden public participation. Please be patient as we may experience technical difficulties during the meeting. We welcome your public commentary. Please read the following tips and guidelines for the app usage and your participation. This meeting is called to order. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll, please?
City Attorney Joden.
Here.
City Manager Harlow Schalk.
Here.
Commissioner Halliday. You know what, Mr. Mayor, if you give me just a second, he may be stuck in the attendees. I'm sorry. And I don't actually see Commissioner Halliday there yet either.
Okay.
So we'll move on. Commissioner Dean.
Here.
Commissioner Logan.
Here.
Commissioner O'Loughlin.
Here.
Mayor Collins.
Here. Any comments or questions from the commission or discussion? Recommendations from Helena Citizens Council, Representative Diana Hammer. Madam Clerk, do we have Ms. Hammer on?
Mr. Mayor, I'm looking through the attendees now. I do not see Diana's handle. Maybe I can alert you if she does appear in the attendees.
Thank you. City Manager's report.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Just a couple of quick updates before I'll turn it over to Amanda, who will provide a quick update on the work we're doing to collect further details on the ARPA projects that will be brought back to you all. First, I want to make sure and let you know that today I did receive acceptance of a job offer for the fire chief from our assistant chief, John Campbell. John Campbell has accepted as our fire chief, and he will begin work in that role beginning effective Monday, December 6th. And it was a very, very competitive group. I know that we had Commissioners Logan and Dean in on the interviews, and we appreciate your time, and I'll be sharing out a thank you to all of the citizens and partners involved in those interviews. Again, really great crowd of applicants and very competitive, and I'm very pleased to share that we'll have Chief Campbell on as our permanent fire chief. Also want to share that we heard from the Department of Commerce just this afternoon that the YWCA did receive a grant as applied for by the city for improvements at their location for $607,000, just roughly $607,000. Those dollars will go towards the air conditioning and other structural improvements that they need to make at the location. It was not the full amount that they had requested. I know they had requested over nearly almost $1 million, if not more, and at least this gets them started down the road of those improvements. So we're pleased to see that happen. We do have one more application sitting in there for a Habitat for Humanity grant, and hope to hear more soon. Dodge Avenue, just a quick update on Dodge Avenue. As you recall, we brought to you all thoughts on the evaluation of a street vacation on Dodge Avenue. That was brought forward by Headwaters Brewery, who is a tenant at the Farmers State Bank location, and which is also which includes the, I think it's 1880 coffee shop. That conversation has been going well. There's 3 property owners that are actually affected by Dodge Avenue, and we've learned a lot more around agreements the city had that we hadn't seen before, that helped us understand more of the conversation with the property owner directly next to Dodge Avenue. And those conversations are going very well, and we hope to have a resolution among the three primary property owners without having to legislate an answer soon. If that legislated answer, which was to no longer temporarily I believe it was temporarily close the road where it stands currently. If there in fact is if we cannot get to a final answer of an agreement among all three, then we'll come back. I'll come back to the commission. But at this point, there's development next to Dodge, and having had more conversation among the property owners is even of greater benefit, given that there's potential for development nearby in the future. So more conversations than had been taking place among the property owners previously, which is good news. So I know that this item, along with another in the community, are neighborhood issues that had been brought forward to the commission to help solve, and to the staff to help solve. And we're hoping to continue this effort of, instead of trying to legislate an answer, help the neighborhood solve these issues locally. So I see a question from Commissioner Laughlin.
Are you done with your presentation?
I am not, but I know that Dodge Avenue was an item that Commissioner Laughlin had brought forward, so I wanted to make sure. And before
Commissioner Laughlin, is it pressing that can she finish her presentation and then you can question?
Sure, if that's what you prefer. It was just a quick question on that, but that's fine.
Okay. Next up, MDT. Just wanted to share that this week, Commissioner Dean and I met with staff and MDT to talk about Custer and some concerns. Of course, Custer is part of the urban dollars potential projects, and previously it had been identified by the TCC as a priority project. Based on that conversation, a couple of follow-up items need to be completed, and then I'll be coming back to the commission to ask if the commission is interested in continuing forward with Custer. There's a significant amount of funding that needs to go forward in it, and as well follow-up items that will help improve the level of information you have before deciding whether to move forward with Custer or not. Most primarily, the greatest concern when this first was brought by MDT in the beginning of this year was that the city would be responsible for any cost overruns, even though Custer as an improvement project was of significant expense and went into areas that were not necessarily in the city. So there's some additional conversations. Also, the regional director was new at the time, and he is very interested in changing the method of communication, and very helpful meeting this week that he set up with himself and the team to clarify and make further ask of us to be either committed or not to the project, and if not, what that commitment is. So where is it that the City of Helena would like to go next? So I will bring that forward to you as soon as I have more detail. So the more detail is far more into whether or not MDTs, they are going to be revising the MOU and then sending it over based on the conversation. They're also going to be asking us to talk with the county to cover cost overruns in those areas that are county. And I understand from Commissioner Dean that the county had not committed to do that previously. So those are additional conversations pending. So no action there, just making sure you're up to speed on that. Two more items and then I'll turn it over to Amanda. Yesterday, the League of Cities and Towns had asked for applicants into their board member pool. I have heard that they would like to see the City of Helena apply, and even though it is late, they've asked if we wouldn't apply. I would be interested in putting in my name as part of that membership if the commission is interested in that. Otherwise, we can let that go, or one of you can also apply. But it would be a letter of membership, and they need access to someone during the legislative session on a pretty routine basis as well. They're going to be entering into some pretty complex conversations around water in the coming months, in particular. So wanted to offer up my expertise to the board, and also the representation of Helena has traditionally been involved at the league, and it's an opportunity for Helena to be involved again. The IT, I just wanted to last share to you that Commissioner Dean and I were part of the ITS board meeting. At the ITS board meeting, there was an update on the activities, revisions to the bylaws, and in particular, conversation around the services offered to the City of Helena and the cost for it in relationship to next year's budget. So the county begins to complete their budget process now. Today is 180 days in advance notice by the bylaws that we would need to make if in fact the City of Helena was not interested in moving forward with the ITS system next fiscal year. So what I can share to you is that the new IT director is very dedicated to evaluating actual cost of services and evaluating the delivery of those services. He's only been at the city for, or excuse me, at the county and city for 25 days. So really hasn't been, he hasn't had enough time to sufficiently share what his analysis is of the services received. I can tell you that because he does not work for the city, and much of the IT team does not, they really don't know what it's like to receive those services. So I'm optimistic, but ultimately at the ITS board, I shared that I'm not comfortable that we can put together a decent exit strategy at this point, because I'm not actually clear the expected services that need to be covered that IT is covering for us, aside from base service delivery. And that base service delivery is primary security and network systems, along with replacement of any base activities, base service equipment. So we already know that our finance system improvements, we had to start that project. We don't have project support for improvements in our systems. It's currently maintenance. So really there are two paths, and I want to make sure and tonight get some direction from you all on the IT, where you would like me to go and in which direction over the next 6 months, really. And that puts us in a position for the next year, truly, because next December is when we would again look at the county's budget. So the two paths are continue forward with the current new director and let him spend the next 6 months actually evaluating the service costs and the evaluation of what's delivered to us as a city, as a customer. And then the other path is we work with the new director to spend the next 6 months to complete an exit strategy beginning July 1. And just as a reminder, the City of Helena and you all agreed to add $100,000 this last budget cycle to improve the opportunity to bring in a new director and replace a position that had been cut. That was part of that $100,000 was a request from you all that I evaluate and begin to implement an exit strategy. I just want to make sure that you're aware of the struggle in finding a really good IT director. It took this long, and the reality of the amount of time they will have to complete it in comparison to the budget timing, that the county wants to see happen for their next fiscal year budget. And then last, I'll turn it over to Amanda for a verbal update on our work forward after the working session on ARPA.
Are you done?
I am there, and it's off to Amanda for an ARPA update really quickly.
Commissioner Laughlin, you have the floor.
Yeah, well, I just had one really quick question on the Dodge Avenue. When you mentioned working with 3 property owners, is one of those 3 the property owner who is doing the new development adjacent to Dodge?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Amanda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. Since the ARPA working session, the staff has been putting together one-page summaries that will include further detail on the programs as per your request, as well as some general cost breakdowns for how the associated costs were being calculated. And we'll have that for you on December 15th, the next admin meeting. As we're going through this process, myself and Director Danielson are also trying to keep an eye on making sure that we are still working within our eligibility for the federal guidelines. As we get to more details, we're learning more and more as time goes on about sort of where our boundaries are on that. So we'll continue to make sure that we've got a good list for you. And then also just an update on our public engagement. Public Information Officer Jake Garson launched a new public engagement for the handful of items that you showed interest in during the ARPA work session to get more information and some public feedback on. And that launched about a week and a half ago and will be remain open until December 10th. So when we come back to you with those one-page summaries, we'll also have some feedback from the public. To date, we have about 35 submissions and 221 page views. So it's getting good traction, but of course we are always encouraging more folks to jump on there and weigh in. So if you want to share that with your networks, that would be great. If you have any questions, please let me know. Other than that, that's everything I have for you today.
Thank you, Amanda. Any comments or questions for Amanda?
Mayor, I do have one question for the city manager.
Go ahead.
I'm just curious, city manager, have you gotten updates from either the National League or the Montana League on the legislation that is moving that would provide local governments with additional flexibility with their ARPA funds? And I'm just wondering if you know kind of what the status and how that might impact if you have a sense of that legislation.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner. I have not received an update recently on that. I can reach out for that information after this session and get more detail. I did receive, as part of the MDT conversation, further detail. We asked about the new infrastructure bill and what access we would have to some of those dollars. As we understand it, we would have very little access to those dollars, and Commissioner Dean can also share anything different that she may have heard or more that she may have heard. But basically, as I understand it, those dollars that would be coming through that new infrastructure bill for roads, those already go into primary programs that are established, and they do not add more funding to the City of Helena. Anything else that you might want to add, Commissioner Dean, from that?
No, that was more or less the read that I got. I will say that, especially for, I know a couple of the commissioners have been on the TCC either currently or before. I feel like it was one of the more positive conversations that I have been a part of with MDT. Not necessarily, everyone's on the same page, but definitely an acknowledgement that we need to find a better path forward. And also, before we were hearing that, there were some absolutes that had to be included because of the federal government. And what we understand now is that's not necessarily, there isn't, we asked for a list of, what are the non-negotiables, and there aren't necessarily any non-negotiables set in stone, which I think is a positive step forward. Still difficult conversations, but better than I think it was even 6 months ago.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments or questions for the city manager or Amanda?
Well, can I just make one quick comment?
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Just on my question, which wasn't really about the infrastructure bill, but more about ARPA.
Mhm.
I mean, I just think it's worth exploring how that legislation, and I think it's Senate Bill 3011. It passed the Senate by unanimous consent, I think, before the holidays. I don't actually know. I mean, I feel like the league should have a sense of that. You know, it does give local governments a little bit more flexibility on how to use their own allocation. So it would be helpful for me to know if that adjusts what we might want to consider with our $8 million allocation. So, you know, perhaps before the December 15th meeting, I think that would be helpful.
You bet. Also wanted to share one of the follow-up questions you had for me, Commissioner, was around the county's interest in hosting out at the fairgrounds, any other camping opportunities for trailers and alike. And I wanted to let you know that they were not interested in that. However, we'll continue to ask for interest since it was around our homeless population and camping. So I wanted to make sure and close that loop with you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Ms. Hammer, do you have any update for Helena Citizens Council?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Not much of an update. We haven't met since the last HCC update on the 22nd. But we have newly elected HCC officers or representatives, and we'll have a swearing in ceremony the 4th Wednesday of the month in January at the Civic Center. So that's really all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. City Clerk update.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners, City Manager. Tonight we have the latest round of board application review. You should have received the mayor's memo. As an aside, due to a clerical error, we issued the PSA for an incorrect position on the Citizens Conservation Board. So my office has since corrected that on the PSA and re-advertised. We will be taking the applications from the previous round of recruitment and putting them back into the queue for consideration by the mayor to present to all of you. We apologize for that. We are transferring our information from an old database into a new one. It was a simple switch of a field that unfortunately caused that error. I'll allow the mayor to introduce the applicants on his memo that he's proposing this evening, and I'm here for any questions that you might have. Commissioner Dean, I apologize, Mr. Mayor. Do you have a question for me?
I did. Just on the PSA that is being re-advertised, what's the due date for that one?
So that date, we always advertise for 2 weeks. And so the closing date, since we reissued it yesterday, will be the 14th of December.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm recommending the following board appointments. ADA Compliance Committee, interim appointment of Carolyn Scott to the ADA Compliance Committee as Disabled Community Representative. Term will begin upon appointment and expire on September 1st, 2024. Interim appointment of Deborah Lane to the ADA Compliance Committee as a Business Owner Representative. Term will begin upon appointment and expire September 1st, 2024. Non-Motorized Driver Advisory Council, MTAC. Appointment of Joel Ebert to a first term on the Non-Motorized Driver Advisory Council. Term will begin upon appointment and expires on March 31st, 2024. Appointment of James Serwo to a first term on the Non-Motorized Driver Advisory Council. Term will begin upon appointment and expires on March 31st, 2024. Appointment of Lucas Wallace to a first term on NCAP. Term will begin upon appointment and expires on March 31st, 2024. Any discussion? Any questions? All right. City Attorney?
Mayor Collins, commissioners, nothing this afternoon.
Department direction, feedback needed. Input received an update on open land, major project public process and open land major recreation project for 2022. City Manager Halshaw and Parks Director Panozzo.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I know that this is an added step in front of the commission adoption, and based on recent conversations on the ADA trail, and this just gives an added opportunity for us to have conversations with you all about the process, the work so far. I know there's been questions around DeFord, and want to make sure that you all have enough time to ask those questions before they bring the team brings forward the open lands major projects for you all for the 2022 season. So I'll turn it over to Director Panozzo to provide an update and share information, and just ask the Director Panozzo to add additional information on DeFord and the process from that working group up to where we're at today. Thank you.
Director Panozzo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, Commission. Christy Panozzo, Parks and Rec and Open Lands Director. I will share on my screen if I'm able. Oh, that's okay. I will just go through the memo that I have provided. I'm not able to share my screen. And this is all a part of your packet. So for discussion today, is staff recommendations and updates on our open lands major projects process specific to recreation, and our open lands major projects recreation projects proposed for the 2022 season. We'd like to provide you this information on proposed additions. We have proposed additions and updates to our open lands major recreation public process. The proposed additions are to Appendix P, pages 8 and 9. They're highlighted in yellow and they are attached to this agenda item. We also have 3 projects that have gone through our major projects public process this fall, on which we'd like to provide information. Our recommendation and alternatives, our staff recommendation is we propose additions to the public process while continuing to explore feasibility and efficiencies in this process. The annual process that we undertake is very time intensive and produces more projects than can be implemented in a given year or even a 2-year time frame. We'd like to explore the potential of a major recreation projects process potentially every other year. We do propose moving forward 3 projects that were proposed by the public this year. These projects were proposed by user groups and the public, vetted through the open lands major projects process, and reviewed and analyzed by staff. These projects represent fulfillments of goals and objectives outlined in the Helena Open Lands Management Plan. And that's our new Chapter 7 recreation chapter, and that's also attached to this agenda item as well. These 3 projects improve community access and use, promote sustainable use and stewardship, and sustain future needs and growths of our open lands recreation system. The next step in this process for these projects, if they are ultimately approved, is engineered designs for projects in need of such, seeking grant and funding sources, and implementation into the budget and work plan. Most grant and funding sources require a public process prior to application for the grant. Alternatives that we can consider are not changing the public process and not moving forward with our recommended projects. Background on this issue. Additions to the open lands major recreation projects process. This new Helena Open Lands process was proposed and implemented for the first time in the 2020 calendar year. Based on feedback and comments we have received regarding implementation of approved projects, there's a need to specifically outline implementation steps, mostly regarding communication. And those are highlighted in that document that's attached, those proposed changes. We did not receive a ton of feedback on that. We mostly received feedback on the 3 projects that are going through the public process, or that we've brought through the public process this fall. And the first of those is the White Acquisition Trail Improvements Project. That white property was acquired by PPLT and subsequently donated to the City of Helena in 2019. It comprises 90 acres, primarily on the south end of LeGrand Canyon Trail, west of the intersection between LeGrand Canyon Boulevard and Silverette. The existing trails are primarily historic Jeep, motorcycle, and game trails, and a number of them connect trails within the open land system. There are no intentionally designed trails within that area, and many trails do cross private property. A number of trails are located on unsustainable grades and are candidates for closure or rerouting. And this project proposes to decommission some existing trails and construct new trails. So details on the project are also attached to this agenda item and are also provided on our website. We have also done a project assessment, which is similar to an environmental assessment of this project, and that is also attached to this agenda item and provided on our website. The second project that we propose to bring forward is the Upper DeFord Trail Improvements Project. This project was the culmination of several trails projects proposed during the 2020 major open lands recreation projects process. During that process, the city proposed 2 projects: improvements to the parking areas along DeFord, along Davis Street, and installation of accessible restrooms at the old shooting range trailhead. The first was postponed for further analysis and evaluation with city transportation and engineering for parking opportunities to further minimize safety risks associated with recreationalists backing their vehicles and onto the Davis Street traffic lane. This is also a project that would be considered as part of the Federal Lands Access Planning Grant that transportation is currently pursuing for improvements to Davis. The later was brought forward and approved as part of the 2020 major projects process. So that accessible bathroom at the old shooting range trailhead was approved last year. It has not been installed yet. We have been seeking and have attained grant funding that we will bring forward to the commission. As part of that project, there were 2 additional proposed projects from the public. One had to do with the existing unmanaged bike skills area located between the DeFord Trail and Davis Street that has numerous unsigned entry points and no outflow trail. Additionally, the bike traffic descending down the DeFord Trail from its southernmost intersection with Davis Street to its northern intersection with Davis Street adds to trail congestion and creates safety concerns for some trail users. There was an additional proposal in 2020 to enhance existing trails to provide extended trail access for those with disability and mobility issues. The Parks Department recommended both of these projects be considered by a working group to take on the task of developing and managing the upper and lower DeFord bike courses while working concurrently to develop a plan to address multi-use issues with the DeFord Trail. The working group was formed in early 2021 and met several times with the assistance of a professional facilitator. The city brought forward the working group recommendation through this year's public process, and it is predominantly we're predominantly recommending the working group's proposal and recommendations that include improvements to the DeFord Trail from the old shooting range parking lot to the archery range parking lot. Suggest widen and improve surface, decomposed granite or other such option, pedestrian lights and signage as it crosses the Davis Gulch Road. Create a directional bike trail from where the DeFord Trail begins after crossing DeFord Gulch Road to the archery range parking lot and develop signage to encourage downhill bike traffic to use the directional trail. Improve DeFord Trail from where the trail begins after crossing Davis Gulch Road to Eagle Scout Trailhead to include where appropriate signage, fencing, and high mark remediation. Signage recommendations include speed-related signage and community norm-related signage, such as take care of everyone. Improve the directional bike skills course from north of the archery range parking lot to where the DeFord Trail joins Davis Gulch Road, to include a sessioning trail to encourage bike traffic to stay on the skills course. Consider the creation of ADA parking in the archery range parking lot. Explore the possibility of completing a feasibility study to explore options for increased accessibility from the archery range parking lot to Eagle Scout Trailhead. Improve DeFord Trail south of Old Shooting Range parking lot, same widening surface materials and a raised trail where needed to prevent erosion. And improve signage at the entrance and exit of DeFord and bike skills course trails. Also explore the feasibility of installing a charging station for wheelchairs at the old shooting range parking lot, and designate the DeFord Trail as a shared use path, although downhill traffic would be discouraged. Two additional elements of this project that we are proposing to add based on the additional project proposal that we received and the comments that we received throughout the public process are to install signage discouraging downhill bike traffic and encouraging pet owners to leash their dogs. We also did a project assessment for that that's located in the materials for this item and on our website. This project would necessitate an engineered design, and that would be shared publicly on the city's website when completed. The third project that we propose to bring forward is a trails assessment project. This project would encompass a functional trails assessment of our open lands trail system. This would include trail inventory, condition, and determination of trail construction needs. The city proposes implementation of this over multiple fiscal years, and as funding becomes available. More information on the details of this project are on a document on our website, and it's also included in this packet. We do have some concerns about the outcome or end product of this process and what that final product could and should be used for. There will be extensive financial and staff resources invested in the process that could produce a project with recommendations for significant changes to our established trail system. While designing a new trail system can often be done in this manner, major changes to an existing and long established trail system like ours is challenging both from an impact and construction perspective and from a public acceptance and user perspective. Every user has different ideas and philosophies surrounding acceptable trail design and trails that they use and are important to them. Ultimate recommendations and adoption of implementation will need to be prioritized accordingly and vetted with the community. So through this process, we had extensive public questions, concerns, considerations. We conducted throughout this, we had several meetings, 3 separate public meetings and comment periods throughout this fall. All comments are compiled and responded to throughout this process, and they're contained on a document on our website. And the link to this document, we actually have an updated document. When the deadline for this agenda item was due, we had not finished the public comment period yet. It had not yet closed. So we actually have an updated comment and response document that's on our website now that I will provide after this meeting, or I could put it in the chat as well. Comments specific to the DeFord Trail project were the most frequent and prominent in the comments we received. In reviewing all the comments and the alternate proposal and the recommendations of the working group and HOMAC, staff has determined there's some interest in having a trail in our system that does not allow bicycles, that is specifically for slower moving traffic, pedestrian traffic with accessibility features. Based on the comments, recommendations from the working group and staff assessment, DeFord is a challenging trail to fit that interest, both because of its location next to a road and a bike skills course, and the displacement of existing and established use within that corridor. There is value in assessing an area or trail that could better fit this interest. We receive extensive public comments, and they're included in that document above. The projects themselves were proposed by members of the public, and staff recommendations reflect public input throughout the process. We also received recommendations from HOMAC, and those are on our website. The minutes, they're not approved minutes yet, but those are the minutes from the last HOMAC meeting where they provided recommendations. Financial impact, these projects require significant commitments of staff time and implementation. The estimated project budgets are included in that detailed project document that's attached and on our website. We had 3 public meetings. This process is predominantly a public involvement process, although elements of the DeFord project and working group involved consultation and collaboration. And yes, those are our recommendations and projects, both for updating that major projects process and for bringing forward those 3 projects. I do have Brad Langsather, our open lands manager, is on as well. And we are here for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Director Penozo. Comments or questions from the commission? Commissioner Dane.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the presentation, Director Penozo. I'm wondering if you could maybe give just kind of like a brief update as to where we are on moving forward on the Parks District. I know it's not included in here, and the reason I ask that is just because there's going, obviously, moving forward with that is going to be a really heavy lift. And so weighing that with, you know, fairly large projects that have a lot of divergent community opinions happening at the same time. I'm weighing those two things together. And so I'm wondering if maybe you could give us an update on where we are with the Parks District conversation.
If I may, and then I'll turn it over to Christy really quickly. You point out a very important part of this conversation, Commissioner Dean, and that is the establishment of a capital improvement program that is staggered over time. That was one of the questions I had for Director Penozo, is that there's such a volume of work to be done with the annual process like this. It just continues to back up and lost, there's loss of direction within there that could occur, as well as just the reality of having too many things being asked at one time. So I appreciate first that you point out that there's some divergent points of view, but then also that it's a lot of projects that are not actually potentially realistic. So the benefit of this process is that it is the public input process. There's still the next pieces, which are funding, feasibility, and schematic designs. Those are processes that have to happen before we actually construct something. So that also gives more time for input and analysis in the community. So I'll turn it over to Director Penozo to add anything additionally.
Dr. Penozo, would you answer Commissioner Dean's concern or question, please?
Sure. Mayor Collins, Commissioner Dean. Yes, we continue to have discussions within the Parks and the City County Parks Board about the Regional Parks District. We are planning a meeting with county representatives. We of course need their support and buy-in to move forward with the Regional Parks District. And so that's sort of the next step, is to really sort of suss out where we are with that, how we move forward with them, what they need from us to be able to move forward on that with us.
Commissioner Logan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wondering if perhaps staff could talk a little bit about the motivation behind changing the public process.
Director Penozo?
Mayor, Commissioner Logan, just for clarification, you mean the additions that we're making to the chapter, the appendix?
Yes.
Public process.
You'd mentioned the highlighted portions that were in the packet, and maybe just talk a little bit about the motivation behind that, or the interest behind those recommended changes.
Sure. Mayor, Commissioner Logan, this was the first year that we had actually implemented projects that had gone through the public process. When we were constructing the accessible trail on Mount Helena, we received quite a bit of feedback about that. People expressing concerns that, they were not involved in the project, or that they didn't understand the changes that were made. And so a lot of that is in response to that. I think that because this is a new process, that, we have only gone through a whole process cycle once at this point, a complete one. I think that there'll have to be changes as we move. I think we'll have to, figure out what works best. What we're finding is that we receive a substantial amount of projects proposed to us through this project, which is great. We have great public involvement. We have a lot of citizens and groups that are very interested in projects on our open lands. But it creates a workload that is potentially, not sustainable year after year. So, I think that it's an ongoing evaluation of how a process like this works.
Thank you, Director, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You bet. Any other comments or questions for Director Panozzo?
Yeah, Director Panozzo. So the comments we've gotten on DeFord, and mostly it seems like it's the south of the parking area trail that seems to be drawing a great deal of attention on the question of bicycle access, pets on leashes or no pets at all. And it seems like part of the issue is we've determined the trail should be built out a little bit more, but also built out so that it offers greater accessibility. But then there's criticism that greater accessibility is stymied if it doesn't have certain restrictions put on it. Do we have, or have we done prior to determining, DeFord should be sort of built out for greater access? Do we have any kind of inventory we've done of the best trails in our system or locations in our system for either ADA inspired or universal access trails at this time?
Mayor, Commissioners, we don't have a specific study that we have, but and I will potentially turn this over to our open lands manager, Brad Lanks out there. We have limited ability to create trails that are accessible and meet the guidelines for accessibility on our trail system, given our terrain, the steepness of our terrain, and given the limited access points that we have that have accessible parking and facilities. So I don't know if, Brad, maybe you have anything to add to that. We've talked about this extensively.
Christy, the only thing I would add is that we did build the accessible trail at Cabernet and Saddle Drive in 2012. And that was on a property that had topography that lended itself to the construction of that trail. Our second project, as we all know, is on Mount Helena. So we don't have a lot of locations, like Director Panozzo mentioned, that have parking options or topography that'll allow for the construction of a trail that'll meet the guidelines that we're working with.
Commissioner Valadez?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. With regard to, the generalizing, the two comments that I've noticed about that southern portion of DeFord have related to bicycle access and pets. Do you know, Christy or Brad, is there guidance, best practices regarding, in creating these universal access trails? I know the literature that Mr. Peden referred to in some of his correspondence, but is there guidance or best practices when it comes to shared use of those trails, pets, bicycles, when you're looking to get people on there with mobility limitations?
Mayor, Commissioner, there are many different guidance documents and different sets of guidelines in addressing accessibility. What we have been using is a document. It's accessibility guidelines for outdoor recreation and trails. It's put out by the U.S. Forest Service in cooperation with the U.S. Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration. We use this because it most fits our trail system. We have a lot of land that borders U.S. Forest Service or shared trails with U.S. Forest Service. Our terrain is very similar to U.S. Forest Service type terrain, and so this is the guidance document that we have most used for the couple projects that we've done for accessibility. They do not have specific guidelines for, excluding bikes or excluding pets. There are some guidelines that I think speak to that in other guidance rubrics.
So, are you finished, Commissioner Halliday?
Just sort of I have one other thing. It kind of moves a little bit away from that. So if you had a follow-up on that, Mr. Mayor, I'd defer.
No, I see a lot of discouraging of biking, and you're saying that the documents you have don't specifically relate to that. So then, where are you basing all of the your trail information from? You mentioned the book you got there. According to Commissioner Halliday, you said that the guidelines are coming from the Forest Service and all of that, but is it related to our trails? Because when we're talking about sharing the trails, I don't see us sharing the trails yet. I see a lot of discouraging of bikes.
Mayor, Commissioners, we are not proposing discouraging bike use on the DeFord Trail. We are proposing to have some separation of downhill traffic to reduce the speed that is on the DeFord Trail.
Commissioner Halliday?
Yeah, so Ms. Pinozzo, I guess the question, and then maybe just an explanation of it. If the commission or a future commission was interested in, for the comprehensive trail study piece of the proposal in this year's major projects, could rolled into there be an examination of potential locations for, let's just say, universal access trails, the design of them, the build of them, the considerations for, if a separated use is a good idea or not, so that we don't try to necessarily fit all existing trails for all interested parties, because it feels like something like DeFord almost becomes a zero-sum game. On the one hand, we want to build it out for more inclusion, but then there's the complaint that certain people are going to be excluded, certain mobility types, because we leave bikers on there, so take the bikers off. But now the bikers are endangered, and I get that point, because I take kids up there to use that trail specifically for the bike skills area, and pushing them onto Davis isn't necessarily the best idea. So is it something where, I don't know if it's maintaining the status quo there for now, while the study is done? I don't know what the answer is, but whether it's pushing pause on this flashpoint piece, still obviously allowing bikes in the status quo, and figuring out if there's a better place to have that situation. I mean, I get what you and Brad are saying, and when I look around the system personally, I don't see where else it would go, but I'm not a trail expert, and I don't pretend to be the most knowledgeable of all of our trails. So is that a piece that we could roll in there, have that discussion, and maybe identify the right place for it that doesn't result in what feels like going to be a knockdown, drag out fight between bikers, hikers, all users?
Mayor, Commissioner, I think yes, and that's kind of what we came to the conclusion of after we had gone through this public process and seen all the comments, that DeFord probably isn't the place to have a pedestrian exclusive trail. There's just a lot of issues that we lined out, that the existing use, putting bike traffic out onto Davis, but there is definitely interest, and I think there is value in pursuing, at least looking at the potential for a trail like that. In our most recent professional publication, we have a we subscribe to Parks and Rec's professional organization. There was a trail featured in their most recent, actually October issue. That was it's called an all-inclusive trail, and it was for people specifically with sensory disabilities that bikes were not allowed on. And so yes, I think there is very much value in looking at where we could potentially have a trail like this.
And I guess just following up on that, if a commission were to say, we think that'd be a good thing to roll into that study, would it still be staff's recommendation to do the build out portion onto Ford, right? I think the decomposed granite, the whiting, and I'm talking about the southern portion, not the directional trail piece to the north of the southern portion, sort of under the auspices of greater access, or would it be a consideration to sort of pull back on that and that expense while examining, the potentials for elsewhere, right? Recognizing that I think it's listed somewhere in the $40,000 range, and maybe that's all of it. Does that make sense?
Yes, Mayor, Commissioner, I believe we could look at both. I think in places where we can make trails, more accessible, I think that was sort of the recommendation of the working group, that there's a lot of value in doing that onto Ford because that benefits everyone. I think, yes, there would be a cost to that. And potentially if the cost were to find a trail that we could develop for, just pedestrian use, accessibility, then maybe that would be where we sort of weigh the, how much are we going to spend on this? Should we put that money towards this other trail?
Any other comments or questions from the commissioners?
Maybe just a comment, Mr. Mayor, and I know that other we're going to take some public comment and others may have thoughts, but just a crazy thought that I'm spitballing thinking about this is just whether this commission wants to think about what to do about DeFord, whether it's worth trying to get a little bit of that study first and determine maybe it's worth doing these improvements on DeFord and leaving it exactly as staff planned. Maybe the money is better put elsewhere to really creating that universal access trail and maintaining sort of the way DeFord is today, providing that bike route. But it just maybe a little bit more of a holistic picture. And from a procedural standpoint, as I'm staring down the gun of 30 days out, you are going to have two different commissioners on this commission in 30 days. The worst possible thing would be to approve or disapprove, I suppose, a project here that one or more of those individuals comes in on day one and says, we'd like to talk about reconsideration, and you're going to be in a process fight out the gate. And so, just a crazy thought of whether or not it's worth considering because of continuity, pushing some of these discussions into January, since we already received some communications yesterday indicating some of your future commissioners have feelings about this portion of the trail.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I know there's no a part of the trail it's not controversial at all. I think we can still move forward with the D4 project north, which is not controversial from the archery range down. We can move forward, but what Commissioner Halliday is saying, I think it has merit where we can do this study and see where we'll go with that.
And I guess I just want to say, I'm not saying that, not supporting the DeFord project. If we think we could do them both, right, like maybe that's a discussion worth having as a commission. I certainly wouldn't want to see us sink $40,000 of resources into it and then say, oh gosh, we can't build that universal access trail someplace else. But I would also want to hear, I'd like to hear too, since we did have a consensus group working on it that came out in support of that trail, right? Does it hurt things to push pause on that piece of the project in order to determine whether or not that universal access is better supported someplace else in the system? Does it hurt do they see a deficit in the proposal then, if that were to happen at this point?
Thank you, Commissioner. Director Pinozo.
Mayor, Commissioner, I'm not sure, that sounded like a very similar question to before. I think, like I said, there is value to creating those accessibility improvements to DeFord and following the recommendations of the working group. That, of course, requires financial commitment, and that potentially, if we're looking at a trail somewhere else that would fulfill some of the interests of, folks who are interested in a trail that does not have bike traffic. I think that's where you would need to sort of be considering the financial piece of it.
Thank you. Commissioner
I
Dean.
apologize, Mr. Mayor. Oh, so I'm sorry. That question was just more for, I know we have a lot of people on who are part of that consensus group. I'd want to hear their thoughts on what would happen if you pushed pause on that southern part of the trail in their mind, to consider those universal access pieces. Is that harmful to their proposal? Does it interfere with it? If that makes sense. So that was just a comment out to the public, because it'll help shape my thoughts.
Commissioner Dean.
Just two things. One, I do think that clarity from the consensus group that Commissioner Halliday mentioned would be helpful. From what I understood, there was also a minority report that came out of this. So, how much I'm interested. Was it a overwhelming consensus, or how was that defined? The other question I had for Director Pinozo is not on DeFord, but on the trails assessment. Can you describe what that process would look like? And the reason I'm asking is that something that we could get started and not just piecemeal the funding together, but piecemeal the actual work before and after potential parks district, or is that something that needs to wait until all the funding is available and we have a resolution or not as to how things move forward in the next few years?
Mayor, Commissioner, no, we specifically envision this being multi-year process. It'll be a very expensive and time-intensive undertaking that we'll likely have to employ a consultant to do. I don't know exactly what it would look like, and that is what we sort of need to sort of figure out. What does it look like? What is the end process? And then what is the outcome of that end process?
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other comments from the commission? Do we have public comments on this topic? Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, I do have several hands raised. The first up in queue is Lindsay Gilstrap.
Hi,
Yeah,
Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Lindsay Gilstrap, 377 Brookfield Drive in Helena. And I am part of the steering committee for Helena Trails Alliance, and I participated in the DeFord working group, which, there are a lot of people that I've worked with in past working groups present. And as a member of HTA and our member of our steering committee, we kind of felt as if we might have missed the mark a little bit. We felt that there was opportunity to create a more inclusive trail, especially on the southern end of the old shooting range parking lot. And we've been discussing, I've reached out to every member of the working group, and that's taken a little bit of time, but there is collective interest in getting the working group back together, just because everyone feels like we could have done better and provided a more solutions-oriented recommendation that was more consensus-driven than majority rule. And so that's, I guess, where the working group currently stands. And we're also interested in including Joel Peden as an ADA advocate, as a part of the working group. And he was there to provide good information, but he wasn't a part of the formal working group, and we like him to be included. And then our other request was to defer bringing this to the commission until 2022. So that would give us a little bit of time to kind of better analyze the DeFord project now that we've all had plenty of time to think about it, and do so, I think, in a more a smaller setting, if Parks and Rec is open to that.
Thank you, Ms. Gilstrap. Any other public comments, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, next hand I have raised is Lisa Bay.
You have the floor, Ms. Bay.
Lisa Bay, I'm at 31 Division Street in Helena. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. I heartily support Lindsay's recommendation that we put pause on this recommendation for now for DeFord Davis. We've all think that we can do better, as she said. The process that we agreed to, a consensus process, didn't bear fruit. We ended up with a majority minority situation at the end. And I was part of the authorship of the minority report. In particular, I was concerned that there was not direct ADA input to the process. Joel Peden and Charles Alvarez at our request came and addressed the group, came on a couple of the site visits where they could actually access. And we got a lot of excellent information from them that really was not incorporated into the end result. I have one other comment, and that is, I believe that you are not getting the best information that you could get on what the standards and BMPs are for universal access trails. And the universal access trails that are currently being built on or anticipated for Helena's trail system don't meet those standards. I'm happy to spend time walking you through some of these standards. They are put out by the US Access Board. They are not under the ADA. The ADA does not regulate universal access trails. And it's a somewhat complex set of guidelines and BMPs, but I think it's really important that you understand these, because the safety of handicapped, disabled folks is at stake here. So I would, like I said, I would be happy to spend time with you, putting together some materials for you to review, that so you don't have to go through extensive guidelines, because I really feel like you need more information to understand this better. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one quick question for Lindsay. Lindsay, are you there? Madam Clerk? Oh, is it that I just want clarification on what you said. Is it that you're looking at the entire DeFord Trail or just the southern part? Lindsay? Lindsay? Madam Clerk?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we
Okay.
can hear you. We can't hear Lindsay if she's saying anything.
Okay. I think that the southern portion of DeFord has the greatest viability for a UA trail. I think there's opportunity up on the bench to create a return sessioning trail up there, and modify some of the bike skills area as well to create enough separation so that a UA trail in the bottom there would provide enough separation, and hopefully work also for those with sensory concerns. The lower portion is a little bit more challenging just because it's very narrow entrance exit points between the old shooting range and the archery range trail, and the archery range parking lot. There's some slope issues there. It would be difficult to create separate paths for bike or multi-use for bike and pedestrians, and then a pedestrian-only route. So I think it's a little bit more complex. Not to say it's unworkable, but I think that if we're talking about low-hanging fruit, the southern portion seems to be like a good place to do a kind of phase one assessment, as well as, like you mentioned, Mayor Collins, the lower portion of DeFord that is north of the archery range parking lot, making that area more accessible. That wasn't an area that was a big concern to the working group. Everybody was in agreement that creating a UA trail in that portion was not feasible due to private property issues, slope issues. So I think that, looking at that lower portion to create it more accessible below the archery range parking lot, and then that upper portion that is south of it's that quarter-mile south of the old shooting range parking lot. And that's, really, I think there's a lot of opportunity to try to find consensus. And we might not come up with an entirely different product, but we would like the opportunity to come back together to see if we can find consensus on certain aspects of the recommendation.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, the next hand I have raised is for Joel Peden.
You have the floor, Mr. Peden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. I too would like to weigh in and support Lindsay's request. This has been an interesting process as far as, working through and trying to create a louder voice for the disability community in our trail system. I just think that there's opportunities, and after having sat down with the Helena Trail Alliance folks for about 2 hours and just having a discussion about what we might be able to do going forward at DeFord, really raised my hopes that if we can take a step back, do some reevaluation, looking at it as from a global level, rather than putting together a group of people who are, in a sense, fighting for their project, right? And creating division and conflict, try to look at it from a broader standpoint. And that was really what we brought away from that meeting that I had with the Trail Alliance. I'd also just like to add that I think within the Parks Department, there needs to be an advisory group created that looks at setting some standards on accessibility within the parks program. And here's why, right? I look at the Mount Helena, what's been labeled and publicized as an ADA trail. The problem is that, yes, you can find a standard that says the grade of that trail is acceptable, but it is the least accessible standard that was used to come up with that solution. And I continue to offer this because sometimes you have to show people really to get them to understand. I am willing to meet anyone, anytime up at that Mount Helena trail and bring a manual wheelchair with and challenge anybody to be able to get up that trail to the top there with that slope. That's not to say that it's a bad trail. one of the things I think that we need to remember is that one size does not fit all to people in the disability community. I believe that if we had a trail rating system for accessibility, and I use the example of a ski hill, even though I'm not a skier, right? That you have the easiest, the green trail, all the way up to the triple black diamond, because people with disabilities are looking for different challenges. If we do something like that, then people know before they even get to the trail what they're going to experience. But by only reading the article that was in the paper a couple weeks ago and having it called an ADA trail, the expectation when people hear Americans with Disabilities Act is what they see within a city, that the slopes are what they are, that, you know, that everything is super, super accessible. And then they're going to get there and they're going to attempt to use the trail, and they're not going to have a good time, or they're going to risk injury or something else happening. And then the thought of ever going on a trail again is probably going to drop to the bottom of their list. So I think there's some things that we can do if the city brings together a coalition of people with expertise in accessibility, and we try to come to some standards and be able to inform people of what they're getting into before they arrive at a trailhead. I'll step off my soapbox, but thank you for the time.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, at this time, I have no other hands raised. I've received no written public comment on this item either.
So, in my own weak way, I approve of what Lindsay's suggestion. So, I think we should go slow, reevaluate, and come back to the table. Commissioner Halliday.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess I have a question for Ms. Gilstrap, if we could make her available. And it's so when there started to be, well, I guess it's two questions. First, I just wanted to clarify when you indicated move the discussion into 2022 or the decision point, is that for all the Ford Trailhead improvements, or really just the southern part with a UA discussion? So one, just to clarify what the sort of working group's proposal is, to take the whole thing back or just a segment and to move forward with a portion. And I guess the second question is feeding off of that. If the recommendation is to sort of table the whole DeFord project for some further work by the working group, can you speak to any communications with or participation by the Bike Guild, who sent us a pretty strongly worded letter, I think, recently, the commission, that is, basically I would construe as, telling us not to kowtow to those who would say pause this project. And I'm just curious whether any of them participated in that consensus group, if you've had any communications, and whether you can speak to whether or not, delaying this for further discussion, which from everything that you've said and this commission has discussed, it makes sense, as the mayor mentioned, but what the, potential feelings are on that end of things.
I haven't specifically spoken with the entire group about kind of moving forward in whether we would move forward with the non-controversial parts or pause the entire recommendation. I think there's opportunity there to move forward where there was consensus in terms of things that were not controversial as a part of the project. But I know that there are definitely some areas where there was a difference of opinion. And I think that those warrant a pause. I think the biggest thing is, how do we move forward without circumventing process? Because we've established a process of how the major projects proposals move through, and the role of kind of a working group to take a deeper dive into some of the proposals. And I don't want to create a precedent that anytime there's people who don't agree with the process, that we just pause every time. So we're kind of juggling those two things. But personally, I think moving forward on the non-controversial parts makes sense.
Thank you,
That's
Ms.
helpful.
Gilstrap. Madam Clerk, do we have any other comments from the public?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I have no other hands raised. And again, I've received no written public comment.
Okay, we'll come back to the commissioners. What the direction we're giving Parks and Rec? Because I'm in favor of moving forward with the non-controversial part and pausing on the other.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I think I'm comfortable in areas where there is true consensus. I guess I understand, the part where there's a lot of where there is disagreement, but are we missing any piece of, I guess this is a question for Director Pinozzo. Do you feel that there are areas where there was true consensus within the working group?
Mayor, Commissioner, yes.
So I would be comfortable with that. I do think that, proceeding with some caution, again, going back to the working group and having some conversations would be good. I think Commissioner Halliday, the term of flashpoint, I think is accurate. And I think a good opportunity. We've had an opportunity to learn from maybe some places where we should have taken things a little more slowly previously. And I think this is a good opportunity to kind of show that we are, being careful in these decisions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments from the commission? Okay, Commissioner, let me see, Director Pinozzo. I think we have consensus on going ahead with non-controversial trio and moving forward and pausing on the other.
Yes, thank you. I think I have that. We will be bringing to you on December 20th everything else that's in this memo, all the other projects, including the proposed changes to the process itself, the white property, and the trails assessment. For the deferred project, we will just bring forward the pieces of consensus from the working group, and we will reconvene the working group to see if they can, on that two controversial pieces or pieces that they did not agree on, if they can come up with something for that, and then bring that forward at another time.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may, I would like to ask about the Universal Access Trail Program and the use of the ADA board in evaluating and incorporating those as a better method as part of the trails plan. It sounds as though that point is we all really need to reflect on and include in some way, either in the trail analysis or as part of this broader conversation of the whole map, the larger open lands plan. Do you, so I'll formulate it into a question. Is there an interest by the commission to bring back to the ADA or the implementation and use of the Universal Access Trail system program and spending some time with Ms. Gilstrap and the formulation of the trails plan and evaluating the implementation of that as opposed to the guidelines used for ADA.
I don't have a problem with that.
I'd sure be comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that as part of the comprehensive trail overhaul that this is actually put, or overhaul comprehensive sort of study. I would almost suggest seeing if you can get that put in there, so that they're, you know, we're getting sort of a holistic look at where those guidelines are coming from, what those articulated best practices are. And, you know, again, you could pick and choose later on if you want to then have a body, whether it's the Parks Board or the ADA Board, providing those. But I would recommend making sure when you guys do that comprehensive trail study that you add that in as a piece, so that we're really getting a good sort of comprehensive professional look at those questions. Because I think we're all a little confused as to what the trail standards are. ADA, universal access, what's the best practice, is anything required? And I think some clarity would be really helpful. It's a great opportunity to do it.
Mr. Mayor, and I'm wondering, not just on this piece, but specifically when the working group gets back together, I think it would be helpful if we, not just from the working group, but went to a couple of the open lands organizations that are really active in our community and requesting comment from them, or if there's any feedback that they have before it comes back to the commission. I think that we've had situations in the past where, you know, a working group will have some, they will do good work, but, you know, there's maybe some perspectives that might be missing. And I don't want us to be in a position where, you know, we come back to another meeting and it's, there are pieces that were left out. So I think if we could just make sure on the back end, we reach out to those community partners, if in case they have feedback for the working group, to make sure that happens.
All right, I guess the mayor had to leave. So commissioners, Madam Manager, Pinozo, any final thoughts on this topic or anything else we need to wrap up?
Not that I'm aware. Director Pinozo.
All right, then that's going to move us on to the next department discussion. Item B, FY21 additional carryover requests to budget year 2022. Sorry, Madam Arleshock or Director Danielson?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This is an update on our carryover requests and making sure that you are aware of those, as well the additions that have come up. So I'll just quickly, there is a summary already as part of the packet. If there's anything that you feel like you need more clarification on, maybe perhaps we go down that road, or we could certainly line item it out as well by having Sheila provide a full update. It's up to you. Thank you.
All right, commissioners, any questions, comments on this item?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I did have one question on the Helena Area Community Foundation. Is there a process where we will get kind of a report out of where the money was spent and how? I know that the first round for MBAC, we kind of got that on the back end, it sounds like. I don't think we actually know who it went to quite yet, but I'd be really interested in, you know, making sure that we know who it's going to and for what purposes.
Thank you. Commissioner Dean, the contract requires a reach to me in order to agree with the awards themselves. So I'll make you all aware of those that have been identified. The same with MBAC, they have not made those awards. The information that I have shared, which was that their $15,000 grant award potential for small projects, those have not been awarded yet. So again, as soon as I hear back more, I'll get more, but it's a very generalized statement that I've received from MBAC. Those have not been awarded yet.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, I have one quick question. So this might also be in the contract, but maybe you can just give me a quick answer. What happens if the funds aren't fully awarded of the 402,000?
They would be asked to return them to us because they are a limited spend time. So a return, we haven't gone through that one yet, but I would expect that it would, we would have an incorporation revenue accounting conversation with you all at that point, because it would be a return of revenue that's already been expended in a previous, of cash that had already been spent in a previous fiscal year. So, but I will let Director Danielson answer that.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Commissioner O'Loughlin. I guess can you reiterate your question for me so that I can understand it better?
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, Director Danielson, I was just curious if the Community Foundation doesn't ultimately award the full 402,000, what happens? Is it, I mean, I imagine it would revert back to the city, but if there's more detail on sort of the timeline, and then, you know, what ultimately happens if the funds aren't fully awarded?
Those funds would, thank you, Commissioner O'Loughlin. Yeah, those funds would just come back to the city as not necessarily a reimbursement of the expense. It wouldn't reduce the accounting expense, but it would just be incorporated as revenue to the city.
Any additional questions? I have one. I looked at the MOU of the Community Foundation and I saw our standard non-discrimination language is in there. Is there any obligation on the part of the Community Foundation or us to ensure that the recipients of the grants based on that language are themselves not discriminating?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. That is the expectation of the ask before the award, that we have the moment to take a pause and review the organizations, what the money is intended to address, and then we have the opportunity to answer the question that you just asked, which is, are they partaking in any discrimination?
Yeah, I mean, I know we, I think we have that in most of our city contracts, but you know, it would even be more than just the money being given out, but whether it's a organization that itself, right, in either criteria or access to that organization is in a form discriminatory, even if, say, the manner in which they're going to distribute the funds is non-discriminatory, right? If someone cannot even ask that organization for assistance because their protected class excludes them from even getting in the door to that organization, I do think that's something important we want to think about, because it's something we would certainly say probably no to if it were coming directly from the city. And, you know, just because the Community Foundation is a pass-through, I just want the city to be careful to not engage in passive discrimination.
I thank you. We'll make sure that's added and evaluate when they come in. Thank you.
Any public comments on this area? Madam Clerk.
Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, I have no hands raised at this time, and I've received no written public comment on this item either.
Okie doke. And unless anybody has any final comments or questions, we are going to move on to item 7C, an information-only update on the solid waste composting CCB strategic plan and integrated master plan. Who's presenting?
Sure. So I have both Ryan Leland on, as well as Ed Coleman. Ryan is our Public Works Director and Ed is our Deputy Director. If you would like any further information on that program, the primary and largest part of the conversation from my perspective is ensuring that we respond to your ask early on in this, regarding those smaller organizations who had wanted to have composting available in the community, but it was not a service of the city at the time. We have completed contract implementation with one of those organizations. We're almost done with the second one, and I'm very hopeful services are being provided by the organization that had requested. That's 406 composting. Better Roots is at their last, they're in the last elements with our city attorney's office, and I'm very hopeful to move forward. But I'll also ask Director Leland or Deputy Director Coleman if there's anything they would like to make sure and comment on. We're very impressed with the work with the CCB and the like.
Mayor Pro Tem Commission, the only part that I would add is with the integrated steering committee that is out there is that I heard today that John Hilton and Mount will be the representative for the private haulers, and Matt Alsaucer will be the alternate. So just wanted to give you heads on that as we're moving forward with it. And the strategic plan is we are getting close to negotiating a final fee and scope with the selected consultant for the CCB strategic plan. And answer any questions if you have questions.
Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Logan.
Mayor Pro Tem, thank you. When we had originally, when this was originally brought before us, one of the concerns with the two companies was the conflict with city code. I'm assuming by entering into these contracts that concern is alleviated. Is that accurate?
Yes, they're acting as contractors on behalf of the city, so we're not changing the code. They are, in fact, still functioning as a city operation, but as a contractor providing it. So they are managing all the parts and pieces as they would normally do as an organization by way of the billing, fee collection, but instead of having a separate negotiation between just the residents and the city would not be a part of those conversations. They are, in fact, we are in the middle space right now, ensuring that, well, first, what I like about it is that we have the opportunity to see what we can do to support those businesses and the opportunity. And then second, the most interesting is that they're incorporated while we do this larger study, and have agreed to be part of that larger study with us, so that by the time after this 2 years period of study, we have a comprehensive view of the potential waste management picture, and they're a part of it, and we don't deny an opportunity to compost. So it's the middle ground, and they were pleased to be a part of that.
Mayor Pro Tem, just like a word of thanks to the manager and staff for coming up with this solution that you know, bridged a gap that exists in Helena. So thank you for the hard work on that, and I'll end there. Thanks.
Commissioner Walker.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. Just one process question. This is not necessarily specific to this agenda item, but more broadly to sort of what you all have rolled out as a new kind of communications plan. I really certainly appreciate having on each of the memos sort of what the communication plan is. But I'm just curious, in that communication plan for each item, is part of that reaching out and notifying those that have been, you know, I think of like in some circumstances where the state has like an interested parties list, right? And I think the city has done that. Do you all reach out to those that have been interested in a topic and just notify them that something is on a commission agenda item?
Thank you, Commissioner O'Loughlin. Is there a particular item that you're concerned? So the city's agenda's publishing process overall has not changed by way of communication out. So the method of posting sharing and updating. We've improved the social media. Now, as far as the direct reach on all items related, or direct reach on items that a particular stakeholder might have interest in, no, there is not a process or a list that identifies a particular group needs to be notified in order for the agenda item or on a particular agenda item that I'm aware, no.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering if, and that maybe this is a question to the communications team, if that should be part of a communications plan, right? I mean, I certainly appreciate getting the update. I generally try to reach out to those when I see something's been posted on our agenda, just to let those who are, you know, who may be interested in this topic know that we are going to be discussing it and that we will take public comment. There have been some instances where interested parties are not even aware that it's on our agenda. And I just wonder if that's like a pretty low hanging fruit, right? That you could just notify folks of when the commission will be discussing an item. Or maybe, I don't know if the commission has thoughts on that. It seems like a pretty straightforward thing to me, but maybe there's reasons not to do that. I don't know.
We had under the updates item, that comes out every 2 weeks once a month. Jake, I see, is also here. That's a subscription service that also includes the links to our city updates, but it does ensure that there's opportunity for citizens to opt in. What we run into also, and stakeholders, there's two parts to sending just the broad emails out that I've been cautioned overall, because we don't want them to start shutting off either. So the opt-in subscription service has been the best method in ensuring people get the same general information, but the worry that we will have as any good government organization would be, did we get the right one? What if we didn't get the right one? And so how do we determine which ones are the right ones and which issues? And so I would just say that I'll ask Jake to do an analysis on what's the best way, and the staff and the directors on the best way to ensure that items on the agenda are identified and heard out. If there's a particular example, Commissioner, that you would like to point to that might help in identifying where the gap might be, that would be awesome too. If you all have those, that would be great too.
Commissioner Jean, or no, Commissioner Laughlin, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I mean, I could send up a list if you'd like. I guess I'm just asking more of a policy question. You know, we had a conversation about a communications plan. Could part of that be, and you know, we've had circumstances, and I think about Commissioner Halliday with Beatty Street, you know, where there was explicit direction by the commission to the department to say, you know, please let folks know, because we often get frustration that, like, gosh, I didn't know that this was even on your agenda. I talked to your staff, you know, and I wasn't aware. So again, if the policy by the staff is we do not notify people of when when something is on a public meeting, I guess that's just helpful for the commission to know. But if it is possible to sort of systematically make that a directive to the departments that, you know, and this one just comes to mind because we have two interested parties, right? I just wonder if there was communication to them to just notify that this was going to be on our agenda tonight.
Mayor Pro Tem, I don't want to overstep the city manager, but just to add specifically to that comment about at least the steering committee, there was direct comment with the private haulers. They know that it was on the agenda, and I think John Hilton is actually on the meeting. So there was direct comment or direct communication with them. We did let the selected party or selected consulting firm for the not zero waste, the strategic plan, then that this was going to be talked about here. The update was given. So there was specific comments on these items that went forward.
Commissioner Dean.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. This is kind of a general question, just given some of the my thoughts after Commissioner Laughlin brought up, our interested parties list. And I don't know if Jake knows this or not. I'm not sure what kind of listserv program we're using, but I think it could be helpful in just making sure that we're being proactive in reaching out to the community. If our listserv program does have the ability to, like, when you're subscribing, check, I would like to get updates on, solid waste, parks, transportation, check your list, just like you do when you're subscribing to, any other type of information service. I think that might be a good way for us to kind of be more proactive, and also a good way for us to be able to solicit more input through Be Heard Helena. I think there's probably a lot of people who, are interested in the budget or what we'll do with ARPA. And if they got an email that just said, hey, by the way, you checked that you were interested in the budgeting and city finance, please review and provide public comment on Be Heard Helena. That might be a proactive step that could be helpful. I know that a lot of that is limited by what kind of listserv program we use, but I think Jake's clearly done a pretty good job of keeping that stuff organized. So just one other way to kind of continue to build that community interaction.
If I may, I'll make sure to reach to Jake to see. I know he's on. If our subscription service can offer that at the opt-in, but also I just want to clarify, it is not the position of the staff or the city manager, me, that we do not notify the community when there's an item on the agenda. It is expected, especially if there are items of an applicant or communication from a larger, broader group coming in front of the commission, that the directors are informing those individuals. But the broader potential, no. So I appreciate the opportunity to look into that subscription service. Sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, and Jake is here too.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that it'd be good if we can come up with those. I think we almost stumbled our way into it backwards with, Beatty Street Trailhead and some other issues where, right, it was like hold a bunch of public meetings and make sure you collect as much citizen information on the way in the door of just simple email addresses, right? And anytime you're going to do one of these major parks projects and whatnot, right, you've created a list that you blasted out to at a minimum of that essentially ad hoc interested parties list. I mean, I'm guessing Jake could have greater ideas on how to do it. It's impossible to hit every esoteric issue that's going to come before the commission. Expansion of the wastewater service boundary might not have the largest group of interested parties, but you could think of areas, right? And this is one where you could see a lot of interested persons, both industry, but also citizens who are interested in zero waste, waste reduction, et cetera, who just might want to know sort of what these updates are. And Jake, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add or speak to on any of the comments that have been offered.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and commissioners. These are all very helpful thoughts and comments. As the city manager mentioned, we currently have a pretty general notification when agendas are available and not targeting specific topics. I think there are definitely opportunities to start creating agenda update lists I think from a communication standpoint, my biggest concern is always our ability to be consistent. And as Mayor Pro Tem Halliday mentioned, with the wide range of topics, I would want to make sure our system isn't set up to where we're regularly missing individuals because we're either not aware that they are stakeholders or that they're, applicable to a specific topic. But within our emailing system, there certainly are opportunities to start building out lists to provide agenda notifications, and I'm happy to look into how we can do that.
And that's great. And I just had one other thought, for why the city would probably even want to do that. In some cases, from time to time, I'll catch I'll call it a call to arms on Facebook of someone construing what is going to be on the commission's agenda, which doesn't always, surprise, match up with actually what is being discussed on the agenda. And so sometimes that opportunity for the city to proactively reach out, not crafting the message in a misleading way, but actually just stating what it is, can help ameliorate some of those situations where you get a certain group of individuals who think we're discussing one thing, and it turns out it's an entirely different issue and the whole meeting gets hijacked. So sort of one of those ways to keep people in the know even just a little bit better rather than relying on that kind of secondhand information. Just on a final note on something else, not on the public process, just on this topic for me, I hope as we look at the composting discussion as the study moves forward, that there is that hard look at bringing that system into the city, whether it is everyone is part of a more comprehensive composting strategy, or whether it's doing a similar arrangement that Helena Recycling currently has, right, where there's essentially a city participation in the process as a goal of bringing people into the process, right? Because I think if your goal is just personal responsibility of composting, leave it as this private one-off option with contracts. If your goal is truly incorporating this as a zero waste, as a waste reduction scheme, because you believe that that is a better public and an important public good, then the city should be looking at how you increase usage, right? And increasing usage isn't just educating people that it's there. It's going to require probably some policy tweaks, either full-on adoption or other incentives to get greater participation. And I hope you guys will make sure that that's actually looked at in the comprehensive study.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. That is the intention and the beauty of having such a broad group of stakeholders in support of the project. So that's the hope, that they keep that on the outcome side.
Commissioners, if no other questions or comments, is there any public comment on this agenda item? Madam Clerk.
Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, I have no hands raised and I've received no written public comment on this item.
All right, well, we'll close public comment on this item then, which brings us to our information only enterprise resource planning project update. So Madam Manager, do you have something you want to offer on this one, or do you just want to throw it out to questions?
The latter. I know that Mayor Pro Tem, I know that Director Danielson is on as well. Tyler, who is our project coordinator with Director Danielson. So it's an opportunity for us to introduce Tyler to you as well, to provide a quick overview and make sure one of the project kickoff items that we're intending anytime we have these larger citywide projects, that we invite the commission to attend a kickoff or at least a general info meeting so that you're aware before we really get into the weeds of it, what's happening and where we're going. Just wanting to make sure that you're kept in the loop. I know that wasn't an opportunity we could nail down, so I want to make sure that they have the opportunity to just quickly share that info to you.
So Director Danielson or Tyler, take it away.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem and Commissioners, and good evening, and we'll be brief. I just wanted to keep you updated on the enterprise resource planning project that we have kicked off. We started our fact-finding sessions with departments throughout the city, and it's been really quite eye-opening on all of the workarounds that the staff are doing to be able to do their jobs with an antiquated system that hasn't been updated in over 20 years. And I'm very, very thankful that Tyler Weingartner has come onto the team for Helena as our project manager for this project. He's doing wonderful and keeping us on track. And he's acting as the primary liaison between the city and our contract consultant, Barry Dunn. And with that, I think I'm just going to turn it over to Tyler real quickly. There was a presentation in your packet to kind of give you a timeline of where we're at, but I think that I can let Tyler kind of expand on what our steps have been and what our steps going forward are in the next few months. Tyler?
Thank you, Sheila. Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, my name is Tyler Weingartner. As I should have said, I'm the project manager for this ERP project. I can go into details about what the ERP project is, but per Sheila, I'll just give you kind of an update on where we're at. If you look at this project, I think the first thing you need to understand is that this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And we're looking at from a standard timeline of between 18 and 24 months. And that really is the business standard. It could go on further than that depending upon what vendor is selected. But we'll break this project up really into two phases. The first phase is identifying the ERP vendor that best matched the City of Helena's needs. And that really started off in November, the 1st of November, and will continue on to the 1st of January. And this process really is where we identify what we currently do from a business process standpoint, what are our strengths, our threats, our weaknesses, and opportunities. After we kind of identify on how we do things, what the process is, identify what is our future state, what is our desired process, our desired business goal, and then come up with the requirements. This is what we want our ERP system to do. This is what we want the ERP system to solve. Once we have gathered all that information, we will release this RFP out to the community with the help of Barry Dunn. And we're looking to identify not only just these niche ERP providers, but really any ERP provider in the country that can meet our business needs. That process will take us up into the end of April timeframe. But once we do get the vendors' responses, there'll be a subgroup that will score these responses by the ERP vendors by a weighted amount. Did they meet our business requirements? What is their proposed project management plan to make sure that they meet our needs? What is their communication plan? Once we grade these initial vendors, they'll go on to interviews and demos. And that'll be with a smaller group that passed that initial stage. At which point then we will go to awarding the contract for a fully executional contract. And again, that'll take us up to the end of April once this vendor is determined. At that point, we move on to phase 2, which will be the actual implementation of this ERP system. That timeline cannot yet be determined. It'll really just be based upon the vendor and the proposed solution. So I'm sorry, that was very a quick high overview, but if there are any questions that I can expand on, please let me know.
Well, thank you, Tyler. Commissioners, any questions for Director Danielson or Mr. Weingartner?
I guess I do just have one question, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I'm wondering, I know, Sheila, you mentioned how many workarounds you've discovered the staff is currently doing. And I know a lot of the time when you're implementing a really large new piece of software, you're developing kind of the current standard operating procedures while you're, starting the testing and implementation and everything else. I guess, what is when the program is getting through the implementation phase and getting ready for testing by staff, I guess, what is the capacity that's going to be there for that kind of testing that I'm going to guess is pretty extensive with this large of a piece of software.
The entire department team, excuse me, has been asked to make dedication, a dedicated time, set aside dedicated time of the staff. So every department is impacted by this transition. It's a pretty heavy lift, and that longer marathon is exactly the way to look at this. It is not an easy process, and thankfully Director Danielson has done this before and can speak to kind of that the ebb and flow of the demand too.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Dean. That is a good question because, you know, and probably the primary reason that the city has not taken on this type of project in recent years is because it is such a heavy lift. There is a lot of staff time involved. And not only, you know, during this initial phase, but in testing and implementation, and depending upon, you know, how that goes, you never know. We're trying right now to get our online utility billing payment portal up and running, but we've run into some setbacks with trying to get the appropriate data to that software company so that we can move forward with that. So those are those things that are you can anticipate, but you're not quite sure what's going to happen, and could very well, you know, fall back that, you know, maybe a staff person got sick or went out on maternity leave or whatnot and could delay the project. So those are things that we definitely are mindful of, but I will say that the folks that are in the current project team, which span across many departments, the primary project team are very, very excited about this move, and they are really committed to knowing that this, yes, may be painful, but in the end, it's definitely going to be worth it and make our jobs more efficient and effective.
Really helpful. And I guess just one follow-up. So looking at this, your go live date is looking at like end of April?
No, thank you, Commissioner Dean. That is when we expect to complete our technical requirements.
Okay. I thought that seemed really quick.
Yeah, so, you know, boy, I wish.
Okay, phase one.
Yeah.
Do you have a go live date?
I'm going to defer to Tyler for that, but as I think we stated, we won't quite know what the implementation schedule is going to be until we actually secure a contract with a vendor, a software vendor.
Got it. Okay.
Commissioners, any additional questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll throw it open for public comment. Madam Clerk.
Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, I have no hands raised and no written public comment at this time.
All right, we will close public comment. And that brings us to review of agenda for next commission meeting. We don't have that agenda yet posted, and any commissioners have anything, or Madam Manager, anything on the draft proposed future commission and administrative meeting agenda items? Okay. We will move on from there then. That brings us to item 10, public comment. Anybody from the public want to make public comment at this time? Madam Clerk.
Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, I have no written public comment and no hands raised.
All right, then we will close public comment. Any commission discussion before we throw it to the manager to see if she has the direction she needs today? All right, then, Madam Manager, do you have the direction you need from today's meeting?
There's a couple of items still outstanding. I'm just going to run through the list real quickly, okay? The first, great. I will go ahead, as I shared earlier, the league had requested application from Helena to their board. I will go ahead and complete that unless there's concern. I will go ahead and complete that as a representative for Helena. At least that'll get us back into the broader and include us in the future. Any concerns, let me know. Second, with the IT, I just want to make sure that you are aware that at this point we will be going through another budget cycle where we are still unclear as to the total expectation of dollars spent for Helena, as well as services received. And I will be spending the next 6 months either studying what the actual services and the dollars, now that we have an IT director on who is committed to doing that and I believe has the skill set that will get us there, or I can go ahead and move forward with working with that IT director on the exit strategy. Just want to confirm which two directions you would like me to go. Which of those two?
I see hands, and I saw Commissioner O'Loughlin unmute earlier, so I'll just go from left to right on my screen. Commissioner Dean.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I think that I've been really excited to hear from the new IT director in the last couple meetings. I think he has a very clear idea about where we need to start addressing gaps and is starting to go through an actual kind of methodical process of identifying those gaps in service. One thing that did get included in the bylaws, it was amended at the last meeting before they were, I guess, moved forward, was an annual review of service. Because right now before there was really no check in place to have an opportunity to talk about what services are or are not being provided. So with that, I think that I don't think it's a good idea for us to be exiting in the near future. I think that we've invested a lot in that department over the last few years in the security upgrades. I think it would probably cost us a lot more to get out. And I do think that we have more safeguards in place to at least start checking for service and a mechanism to, to get that service when we do not feel that we are getting it.
Thanks, Commissioner Logan.
Thank you. For the manager, I'm comfortable with you working with the new director to assess, what the city is getting for its dollars. Certainly not comfortable giving you direction to figure out an exit strategy at this point. So thanks.
Commissioner O'Loughlin.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. It's a little hard to provide concrete direction. I find it a little easier when we have something in front of us to review, just to kind of like get a sense. So, I would just say maybe in the future for something like this, that's, I think, fairly complex, it would be helpful to get a little bit more of kind of the pros and cons in your mind down on paper before we're asked to give direction. But I'm comfortable with what Commissioner Logan and Commissioner Dean just articulated. And I did have a question, but I answered it. I found the information. So that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, and from my end, I generally agree with that, with what Commissioner O'Loughlin said in terms of making that sort of decision. I'd want to know from the manager, which one would you prefer at this juncture? This is one of those areas that really feels operational and is predominantly falls to the commission because it's a budgetary question, but it's not the 5 commissioners who get impacted by antiquated or subpar IT services every single day in trying to, or poor service performance every single day, or exceptional performance every single day. And it really is an operational question. And this is one where I would defer. If you said, I want to start exploring that, I'd say that's what the commission should be leaning towards, maybe with some information.
Thank you. I had made the commitment during the budget because we'd added the 100,000 and we'd had this further detailed conversation. I had made a commitment to the commission to work on, and as was asked by the commission at the time, to do this exit strategy analysis. So bringing it back to you is just that, making sure that you know what direction you'd given me before. I'm in that space of we're not ready to do the exit strategy, and thank you for the direction. Next item, MDT. I just want to make sure we'll continue to move forward with our MDT work and bringing back to you all the Custer implementation question for further discussion. Also in the ARPA conversation pending, and we'll ensure the SB 3011 evaluation occurs in advance so that you all are aware the impact that any additional federal dollars might have on the trails plan itself. We will move forward from the archery range, heading north on the project itself as a recommendation to you all, and then put on to pause the balance so that we can have that studied as part of the trails plan. And then additionally, as part of the trails plan, incorporating the universal access trail program method and an analysis of which is the best guideline to use for system. And also additionally ensuring that on the open lands projects, when there's input from specific working groups, when those decisions are made before bringing concepts back to the commission, that the working groups reach, or that the staff reach to affected stakeholder groups. The HACF, the Helena Area Community Foundation grants that are made, I appreciate the flag that there be a specific evaluation of any of those organizations who may be receiving money, be identified if they're potentially discriminatory in any way. I would ask Mayor Pro Tem if there is any particular organization that you had in mind, or any particular situation in the past that you feel like is a good representation, that might help as well.
Commissioners?
Okay, did you have an item, an organization or a flag or a particular situation that you wanted to use as an example? Mayor Pro Tem.
I don't think so.
Okay. And then next, the interested parties list. We'll continue to work through a method for subscription or other method, including working with the city clerk's office to ensure that we're flagging as best we can those items on the agenda. Thank you.
All right. Commissioners, any final thoughts or comments before we adjourn? All right, we are adjourned.